Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. If you're tuning in, you're obviously gearing up for your state certification exam to become a language teacher. Let's just jump right in. Today, we're taking a highly structured look at your study material to really decode the framework the test creators want you to know. Let's get comfortable and transform all this study data into a real, actionable blueprint for test day success.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the teacher's mindset. Then, communication, which is the main goal. Next, we'll hit the remaining 4 C's. After that, we'll tackle the TEKS, those strict state rules. And finally, we'll wrap up with some pure exam strategy.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the teacher's mindset. Now, before we look at a single rule or standard, we have to establish the foundational concept that is going to anchor every single multiple choice answer you pick. You need to think like the Maestro Ideal, the ideal teacher. Forget what's reasonable or practical for a second. Think absolutely ideal. You've got to be the Energizer Bunny here. When you walk into that testing center, leave your real-world constraints at the door. The ideal teacher never, ever humiliates a student. They never interrupt a great conversation just to correct a minor grammar slip, and they never give up. You just keep finding new, creative ways to teach, pretending that every single student in your room can and will absolutely succeed. Moving right along to Section 2, communication. Out of the 5 C's of language learning, communication is absolutely the most important, no question. And it breaks down into 3 distinct, highly tested modes. First up, interpersonal communication. Think of this as a two-way street. It's a back-and-forth exchange like talking, interviewing, or texting a friend. Next, we have interpretive. This is one-way input. It's what the student takes in, like reading a story or listening to an audio clip. Finally, there's presentational, which is one-way output, like giving a speech or designing a poster. Basically, if they're interacting with each other, it's interpersonal. If they're just absorbing information, it's interpretive. But how does our ideal teacher actually facilitate that interpretive mode? Well, they use a specific 3-step reading process. Because let's face it, we can't just hand out an article in Spanish or French and cross our fingers hoping for the best. We have to explicitly teach reading strategies. That means activating prior knowledge or looking at images before reading, highlighting and taking notes during the reading, and summarizing or discussing it after. We can literally never assume students just inherently know how to do this stuff. Now that we've nailed communication, let's look at Section 3, the remaining 4 C's. Communication is number 1, sure, but effective educators seamlessly weave in the remaining C's, starting with cultures. There is a core formula you need to burn into your brain here. Practices plus products equals perspectives. Practices are actions, right? Like taking a siesta. Products are tangible things like food or a piece of art. But the absolutely crucial part, the part that test makers really want to see, is the perspectives. This is the why. Why do families build Dia de los Muertos altars? Well, it's because of a deep belief that ancestors stay connected to the living. Without that why, the culture just doesn't stick. Next up is connections. This is all about linking language to other school subjects, but more importantly, bringing the real world into your classroom using authentic sources. An authentic source is something like a real newspaper article from Madrid or an actual train schedule from Germany. It's made by native speakers for native speakers. On the flip side, a non-authentic source is your typical textbook article explicitly written for learners. And here is a huge tip for the exam. Even if an authentic source seems way too hard for your beginners, the ideal scenario always prioritizes it because it's real and it's engaging. Then we hit comparisons. This is where students compare their native language and culture with the target language. A massive part of this involves exploring cognates and false cognates. Cognates are your absolute best friends. Words like animal in English and animal in Spanish that look the same and mean the exact same thing. Easy, right? But we really have to watch out for false cognates. For example, if a student tries to say they are embarrassed in Spanish, they might accidentally say they are embarazada, which actually means pregnant. Yeah, clarifying that explicitly prevents some highly embarrassing cultural misunderstandings for sure. So here's the crucial takeaway for comparisons. When you're tested on how to organize these cultural or language comparisons, there is basically one absolute correct answer every single time. It's the Venn diagram. Seriously, if you see a multiple choice question asking for the absolute best tool to compare, say, Thanksgiving in the US versus the Day of the Dead in Mexico, go straight for the Venn diagram. It is the test creator's absolute favorite tool to show what's unique to culture 1, what's unique to culture 2, and what they share right there in the middle overlap.
The final C is communities. And honestly, this is where the magic happens outside the classroom walls. The goal here is to send students out into the local community to actually use the language, or to bring the community to them through guest speakers. Ultimately, we're trying to create lifelong learners. If a student graduates and continues to watch movies or follow social media accounts in the target language just for fun, you've won. You've taught them how to keep learning on their own.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Texts, the state rules. When you dive into the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or whatever rigid state laws apply to your specific area, you need to put on your detective hat. These aren't just gentle suggestions, they are strict rules of engagement. You really have to notice the difference between and, which means and, versus or, which means or. If a state standard says students must express and support an opinion, you are legally obligated to make sure they do both of those things. But if it says express or support, you just choose one. Missing a tiny and versus an or will completely change the correct answer on the test, so you have to read these meticulously.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Exam Strategy.
Let's bring all this theory together with some real test day strategy. Imagine this scenario. Your students perfectly memorize a massive list of verbs and their English meanings. They crush the written quiz, getting a 100%. But then, a native speaker actually visits the class, and your students just freeze. They can't speak a word. So what went wrong? Well, the exam might try to trick you into choosing an answer that says they just need more vocabulary. Don't fall for it. The right answer is that the teacher focused way too much on rote memorization instead of real, spontaneous interpersonal communication. To help you out, here is a rapid-fire exam day cheat sheet. Number 1, always choose the ideal over the practical. Do not worry about classroom budgets or time constraints. Number 2, guess the creator's favorites. Be on the lookout for their favorite buzzwords like Venn diagrams, authentic sources, and the 3 modes of communication. And number 3, never correct a student's grammar during a conversational activity unless the mistake completely blocks the meaning of what they're saying. Remember, play that game of pretend, where every single student is incredibly capable and absolutely thriving. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Will you settle for teaching practical memorization, or are you ready to become the Maestro Ideal? Because this isn't just about passing a multiple choice test. It's about the mindset you're going to bring into your future classroom. Are you just going to hand out boring worksheets, or are you going to weave together communication, cultures, and connections to build actual lifelong learners? Take a deep breath, trust your understanding of this framework, and go into that exam ready to be the Energizer Bunny. You've got this.